Up next, former police chief James Craig joins the Authentically Detroit Candidates series to share his vision for the city as Detroiters prepare to select the 76th mayor. This will be the 8th and final interview with mayoral candidates in a series of interviews. Keep it locked. Authentically Detroit starts after these messages. I'm Orlando Bailey of Outlier Media and Authentically Detroit.
And I'm Jer Stays of Daily Detroit.
Detroit, we've got something special coming up that you won't want to miss.
That's right, Orlando. At 10 a.m. on Sunday, June 21st, we're bringing together Detroit's mayoral candidates for an in-depth community forum right in the heart of the East Side.
This isn't your typical candidate event. We're talking real issues, real solutions, and real talk about Detroit's future.
Join us at the East Side Community Network at 4401 Connor Street in Detroit from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
We'll be joined by my Authentically Detroit co-host and community leader, Donna Davidson, to moderate this important discussion.
Space is limited, so make sure to RSVP through the Eventbrite link in our show notes. Oh, and on that form, there is a spot for your voice to be heard to help shape our questions and the conversation.
That's right. Whether you're a longtime resident or new to the city, come by ECN on June 21st. It's your chance to hear directly from the candidates who want to lead Detroit. Hey, y'all, it's Orlando. We just want to let you know that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast episode are those of the co-hosts and guests and not their sponsoring institutions. Now, let's start the show. Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from Detroit's East Side at the Stoudemire, inside of the East Side Community Network headquarters. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Davidson.
Thank you so much for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform of authentic voices for real people in the city of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on all platforms. Welcome back to the Authentically Detroit Candidate Series, where we're interviewing each mayoral hopeful to get to know why they want to be Detroit's 76th mayor. Last up, we have former Detroit Police Chief James Craig. James Craig has dedicated his life to public service and the safety of the communities he has served. Born and raised in Detroit, he understands the challenges and opportunities that define this great city. With over 4 decades in law enforcement, including serving as Detroit's chief of police, James Craig has built a reputation as a strong leader who takes action and delivers results. Now, he is ready to take his leadership to the next level and serve Detroit as its next mayor. James Craig began his career as a Detroit police officer in 1977. After gaining experience in Detroit, he continued his law enforcement career in Los Angeles, where he spent nearly 3 decades with the LAPD. In 2013, James Craig returned home to Detroit to take on one of the toughest law enforcement jobs in the country, leading the Detroit Police Department. He is running for mayor because he believes Detroit needs bold, decisive leadership that puts the people first. He understands that crime, economic growth, education, and government transparency are top concerns for Detroiters, and he has a plan to address them head on. Chief James Craig, for the first time, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
We are so happy to have you. You're the last in a series of interviews.
The last? I was hoping I would have been the first.
Well, we tried.
You tried?
Scheduling.
I was a late entry into the race. Yeah. I probably was the latest. I think I was the last one to get in. So.
Right. But you got in.
I got in.
You got in. That's all that counts.
And you got on the ballot.
And got on the ballot.
Actually,
with
on
good
the ballot.
signatures.
Okay.
You live,
you
get me
lived
one.
That once.
No, not twice.
Yeah, I know that's right.
And I mean that, Donna Davidson, it's good to see you. It's been a while. How you doing?
Well, I got this brace on my knee.
Oh, man, I didn't even know
what
this.
happens. I'm a rather stubborn individual, and I have decided my knee pain is just short term, and I can just walk without it. And so you did not listen to your friend Orlando and
your
I did not listen to my husband.
Davidson.
That was the most significant part of it. We're up at Mission Point, and you know how long that is.
Yeah. Oh, you tried to walk it?
No, I did walk it. I walked from Mission Point to the Grand Hotel.
She's talking about Mackinac Island, everybody.
Yes, and I walked it, and I was fine. Then I got there, and then I had to go down to the lawn for Wayne State University event. And I walked back upstairs and I walked down to the city, to a city council event.
She was happy-go-lucky.
And stood up and couldn't walk at all. But as I was walking to town, I was talking on the phone with Kevin. I was like, I've decided I'm going to walk. And he was like, that's a bad idea. And I was like, you ain't my daddy. Let's just say I wish I listened.
Yeah.
Anyway, good news.
It's
How
good
are you?
to see.
Good
I'm
to
okay.
see you.
I'm okay. We laid my paternal grandmother, to rest on Saturday. And so leading up to that, it had been really, really busy because, of course, I'm the one that is firing on all cylinders, managing the logistics and the arrangements and all of that. It really is a crazy dichotomy to lose someone that's so dear, so close, that's always been there, the matriarch of one side of your family. And you have to deal with that grief, and that grief is very palpable. And at the same time, you got to plan an event. You got to plan like 2 big events at the same time. It's nuts. It's nuts. And I probably should have taken an extra day. I probably should have taken today, but we're here.
Well,
and I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you came.
Yeah.
Because this is our last in the mayoral hopeful. So we want to make sure that we get both of our voices in here.
Right.
I will say this, though. Once an executive director, you find yourself being an executive director in all parts of your life, right? It's like, oh, Donna will do this, or Orlando will do this. You find that is a gift and also a challenge. So remember to take care of you.
Yeah, I appreciate that prompt. Chief Craig, we're happy to have you on.
Thank you.
Aside from the bio that we read, because, that's curated and we know that you all spent some time.
Well, other than he was also served as deputy mayor for the city of Detroit.
Yeah,
deputy
we didn't
mayor,
say it all. Yeah.
And also I served as police chief after Los Angeles and Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
And a lot of people always wonder, how do you go from Los Angeles to Portland, Maine? But I did.
Detroit.
West Coast, Northwest?
I stayed there 2 years.
You went to Ohio too, right?
I went to Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah.
I was the first African-American police chief in both Maine, in the entire state of Maine, historically, and then Cincinnati, I was the first African-American chief in Cincinnati. And Cincinnati's roughly 47% African-American. So, and I was only, I think, the 13th police chief, so they don't have a lot of turnover.
A lot of turnover,
chiefs. Yeah. Right.
So what is something our listeners wouldn't know about you? What haven't you told us?
Well, I'm an open book.
Yeah.
I've been a public servant for 44 years, and so it's not a whole lot to hide. Certainly, again, served in Detroit twice in my policing career. Decided to run for governor. That didn't work out so well. We kind of talked off the air about the signatures, and I was happy that
these signatures were valid.
My hands were directly on the signatures, so I wanted to make sure.
That happened to a few people.
Yeah, a few people got taken off. But, it's funny, in this political, as a politician, certainly they say, well, how could you have not known? And, a candidate is busy doing candidate stuff, but then you have a professional team that's really running the campaign. And so it wasn't until late in the race, and I kept asking the question, I said, when are we going to start getting signatures? How important is that? Do we have enough time? And it wasn't a priority because the first campaign's manager was more focused on fundraising rather than getting signatures. And, in a governor's race, that's 15,000 signatures. Unlike the mayor's race, which is 1,500.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you this question. There was something in you that prompted you to say, I want to be Michigan's governor. And of course, you didn't make it to the ballot because of a problem with the signatures.
Right.
But now you're running for mayor. Why not wait and run for governor? What happened? Why are you running for mayor?
I always wanted to run for mayor. I thought, for me, mayor was a more natural next step. Every place I've worked, particularly as a police chief, you are a significant part of a municipal government. So the police chief really does get a first-hand look. You're exposed to a lot. The governor, I kind of fell into it. Do I think I could have done it? Absolutely. I believe.
How does one fall into a run for governor? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, a lot of people were coming to me. They appreciated the job I did.
Recruited into the job of governor, maybe.
Kind of recruited, but I fell into it in a way. I was recruited, and then the voices got louder, and I started giving it some thought. And, I oftentimes say, running a police department, running a state, running a city, leadership's leadership.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're running Ford Motor Company or the Detroit Lions.
You know, I've run a lot of nonprofits, right? And every nonprofit is not the same. I'm a leader. But I have to say, I found my home here at ECN. This is where I'm able to fully exercise my beliefs and carry those things out. So I'm really interested because...
I'm writing a book on leadership.
Okay, well, I want to read it.
It's coming out, too.
Okay, I want to read it. But before we get to that, I want to ask you a question about how you see Detroit. Because you grew up in Detroit, you went away, you came back, you served as police chief, and you certainly have... you know, your own experiences. What is your vision of our city, and what do we need in order to excel, in your opinion?
Well, I grew up in Detroit. Certainly it was a different time. Matriculated at Cass Tech, the #1 high school in the city. I might add.
Cass technicians are
I got to put that in there so your listeners...
Everybody
listeners got to know.
Is there anybody who went to Cass Tech who doesn't have to say that?
We're proud
I didn't go to Cass Tech. I know, yes.
We're very proud technicians.
My sister graduated from Cass Tech. My oldest sister,
and she
my
never
mother,
let you forget.
Ever. She was, until she really got sick and passed away, she used to organize the Cass Tech reunions every year. She was on the reunion committee. So, yeah, you went to Cass Tech and you have that Cass Tech pride.
Well, and going back to the question, because I know you gave me a few little bullets that I need to hit on. So I remember Detroit, you know, that had a African-American middle class, probably more African-American homeowners in Detroit than anywhere in the country.
Yeah, there definitely were.
Certainly the automobile industry contributed to that. I mean, you know, when I got out of high school, certainly my plan was to become an automotive engineer. I was working at Chrysler. So a lot of people I worked with on the assembly line, you know, homeowners. Many of them lived on the east and the west side of Detroit. And so it was a different city then. And I remembered a vibrant city. It always had kind of historically high crime, but it was just different. And so after years, and my family...
What year did you graduate from high school?
74.
Okay.
And I, started working at then Chrysler Corporation in 1974 in the summer. Very different time. So, you know, I left Detroit. Coleman Young, he was the mayor then. He laid off 1,500 Detroit police officers. Now, what Coleman saw was an opportunity to have a police department better reflect the community.
Demographic makeup.
Do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, because I was part of that and I understood the value of it. Largely, the Detroit Police Department during the 60s and 70s were a lot of problems in the black community. There was very little relationship. So Coleman was kind of innovative in the sense that I think Detroit was probably one of the leaders in integrating the police department.
So,
in fact...
I want to hear this, but I just have to ask you, isn't that DEI?
That's not DEI. And I just bear with me while I go through my...
All right.
Yeah, it's not DEI, and we can talk about DEI if you want. I'm not a proponent. I am a proponent of, equal rights. I came up under that, and that's a whole different conversation. But, so Detroit, 70s, assembly plant, 1,500 police officers laid off. What was unique about the police department, certainly the demographics. Again, I said city was about 80% African American at the time. Police department was 70% white, or 65%, I think. My memory serves me. And so Coleman wanted to integrate the police department. So our classes were largely African American and women, which was another innovative step by Coleman, because around the country, women had just started coming into policing. Even when I got laid off and went to L.A., L.A. was behind Detroit in terms of integrating the police department. It just, but with a growing African American and a Hispanic community in L.A., they wanted to bring in African Americans and Hispanics. And so, but L.A. was way behind. And then women in policing in L.A. didn't compare to Detroit. Detroit was really a leader in that. So, but again, 1,500 got laid off, so I had to make a choice. Do I go to Los Angeles, Toledo, Ohio? I felt at some point Detroit would call me back, and certainly they did after 4 years. But by that time, I was in L.A. and I had promoted, so I ended up staying for almost 30 years.
So another piece to her question was how you sort of see Detroit.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. So coming back, certainly the city had changed significantly. Detroit, at one point, as I was growing up, 1.5, 1.6 million. Police department was about 6,500 police officers, one of the largest police departments in the country. And then coming back, the police department was a fraction of it. Certainly the thing that was most shocking to me was the homes, the abandoned homes, dilapidated homes, vacant property, street lights that were broken, and infrequent trash pickups, buses that didn't run on time. I mean, I look at those things as basic services. Mm-hmm. And, in most cities I live, Los Angeles, Cincinnati, Maine, these conversations were never had, and then a city that was, frankly, facing bankruptcy. So when I got the call, I was the Cincinnati chief, great job. And then I got a call from the state. Was I interested in coming home to be the chief? I said, wow, full circle. That's a dream. I'd set a goal many years ago that I would be the chief of police of Detroit. I just had to go through a path that I didn't know about, but the path certainly from L.A. to Maine and Maine to Ohio and then back to Detroit. So I really didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew I could and would. And so I did. But certainly coming back, well, let me digress for a moment, because the business community in Cincinnati urged me not to come to Detroit. They said, please don't go. The city's a mess. It's going through bankruptcy. You got a good life here in Cincinnati, and we certainly appreciate your leadership, and we want to run you for mayor of Cincinnati. So I was taken back by it. I was humbled. But I said, no, I get to go home, and the city's in trouble. And I didn't know to what extent. So, of course, I know when the emergency manager came in, it was controversial for many of the elected here and the residents. People weren't really embracing the whole emergency manager thing. And I came with that because as a police chief, the thinking was they wanted to bring in someone who wasn't really connected to Detroit politics, an outsider. But fortunately, I was an outsider, but I had an insider view because I was born here. And so, but specific to the police department, and we talk about the basics, So it was widely reported that Detroit Police Department, some 911 calls, it would take as long as an hour. That's unheard of in most places. I mean, in Los Angeles, by example, a much larger city, 7-minute response time, that was the goal. 7 minutes. Here it was 1 hour. The other shocking news was...
If they came.
Because I want to tell you about that, and this was the dirty little secret, and I guess when I talk about it, some of the old heads that were around, they don't so much appreciate me. They had something called Can 04. Because people would talk to me. I'd say, what's a Can 04? So calls for service that not handled by 4 o'clock in the morning, non-emergency calls. Emergency calls, they would get to them. But Can 04 just simply meant at 4 o'clock, non-emergency calls, tossed away. That's not service. And I was shocked when I heard that. And it was almost a conversation like, as a matter of fact. So homicides, certainly Detroit has been known as, at different points, the homicide capital. Well, in Detroit, at that time, the clearance rate, the number of homicides solved, was at 11%, one of the lowest in the country.
Why was that?
Well, I took a look at that because... you had a police department that was demoralized. The morale was at the bottom. They weren't really doing police work. The community's morale was at the bottom. And anybody knows anything about homicide investigations, it's the relationship you have with a community. See, the technology, all that's great. But a lot of cases get solved because someone who trusts and has a relationship with the police department will reach out and call and say, I know who did the murder. I don't want to be identified. So one of the things that I saw coming in is there was a large gap between trust. And so community wouldn't talk to the police. In fact, there were instances that community members told me early in my tenure, they said, I wanted to report the dope house across the street. And when the police came over and I'm talking to them about the dope house, they turn around and point. Now, the dope man is looking. So now you've put this person's life in danger. So who would talk to the police? So that's kind of an example, not the only example, because people were fed up and tired of just, where was the crime fighting? Point in case. You might remember during my first year, there was this apartment building on East Jefferson, maybe a block and a half from the mayor's residence, the Manugian. Mm-hmm. It's called the Colony Arms. This apartment building was compared to the one in New Jack City.
Oh, wow.
Those that saw that New Jack City and that I forget the name of the apartment building right now, but they called it that because every crime imaginable took place in the Colony Arms. It was out of control, and keep in mind from the geography, a block and a half from the Manugian. The Carter.
Not far from the Jeffersonian, right?
Not far from the Jeffersonian. The Manugian was right down the street. Noted that Bing was still the mayor at the time. So when I first came in, I asked the police officers. I met with about 200 or so police officers at a union meeting. I said, what are you looking from me? What would you like to see? And this one gruffy 25-year veteran stands up and says, "We want to be police officers again." And I was shocked. Well, you are police officers. We're not. So I said, okay. He said, what else? I said, fire everybody at the rank. Then it was the rank of inspector and above because they're useless. There's no leadership. I said, okay, duly noted. And so I really reflected on that. And not to mention the fact that Detroit was under a 13-year federal consent decree. 13 years, one of the second longest running consent decree, where we taxpayers paid $1 million a year. Only Oakland, California was ahead of Detroit in terms of its time under federal oversight. And a lot of police officers, and I agree, felt like their hands were tied. They were being penalized for every small little things. But here's what became clear, and this is where leadership, strong leadership comes in. The executive and management team, not everyone, but a large portion of them, they weren't accountable. They didn't hold anybody accountable, and they just enjoyed the world that they worked in as bosses. But the ones who were suffering was those men and women out there doing the real work. And so the other examples, police officers were forced to work 12-hour shifts. Mm. But what was interesting about that decision, they were forced to work 12-hour shifts, but their supervisors remained on 8 hours.
You know, I remember that period of time.
Yeah, that's right when I came in. Well, it was before me, but as I came in, these are things that I saw. And when I talk about the difference of how Detroit was and what it was when I got here. And so, tragic. The morale was at the very bottom, so it wasn't no surprise to me why the cops, they were not motivated to work.
So what about the people of Detroit? You know, you saw certainly inside the system before and later, and you talked about growing up in Detroit and how Detroit was, and then you came back. What were your perceptions about the people in the city of Detroit? How had they changed in that time frame?
A lot of them moved out. A A lot of African Americans moved out, particularly when I got here in 2013. Not because I came in, but I had to
they
add
moved
that.
out because you came in.
Yeah, no, but I had to add that in, a little comedy. But they moved out because of the instability, the lack of economic growth, broken school system, public safety, always an issue. So 7,500 African Americans moved out of Detroit. And so I didn't know that number then. I know it now. And so when you look at the people that lived in Detroit during that time, their morale was at the bottom.
Yeah.
They had lost confidence in city government. I mean, again, I go back to the street.
Let's talk about the police department, for example. Under Mayor Kilpatrick, they shut down police stations all over the city.
Well, I was getting ready to talk about that.
Oh,
I was getting there.
I know. I just
Right.
wanted to throw out some other things. I want to talk about police, but I also want to talk about some other things, right?
Right.
Schools closed, 57, 67 schools closed, neighborhood schools, so you no longer
Understand.
have a neighborhood school.
Right.
And you had this huge housing recession all over the nation. And in
Right.
Metro Detroit, for the first time ever, Detroit residents could rent in places in far-flung suburbs that they could no longer afford. And all of a sudden, you can afford to live everywhere. And so there was this move outward that was, coming from, just opportunity to leave now, but also this pressure to leave because the schools are closed, loss of confidence in government, all of the things you mentioned, and a government that's not functioning on their behalf. But outside, I remember even the concern about fire department, and the fact that fires are raging out of control, and it was taking firefighters a long time to get to the homes. Right. So there's all of the public services were in question, and there was even a concern at that time. I don't know if you recall, what was it? The Detroit plan, where they were. I always forget words. The plan where they were going to mothball certain areas of the city because the geography was too large.
The Detroit Works project.
Thank you. Detroit Works. There's 139 square miles and it's too large. And so
this is the Bing administration.
Under the Bing administration,
I
just before you got here, right?
I heard a little bit about that.
And just preceding you're moving into a city where fire and police departments aren't working. They're threatening to shut down parts of the city. And the fire department has just been decimated. The gang squad has been dissolved. So many other things have happened in the city where people didn't feel safe.
It goes deeper than that because you mentioned the police stations that were closed, and I thought, so I don't know if that was under Bing or...
It was Bing.
Bing.
No, it was Kwame. It was under Kwame.
So they closed these physical buildings down, and the tragedy in doing that, so the most densely populated area of Detroit is on the far west side. When I was here years ago, it was called number 16. Now it was then the 8th precinct. The most densely populated area, and you shut the physical building.
Right.
And then, so what impact does that have on safety? What impact does it have on relationships with the community? Very direct. Very direct. And not to mention, I guess whoever came up with these bright ideas thought it would be okay to physically close the stations that were open at 5 o'clock, as if this is Santa Monica or Beverly Hills. Out there in those cities, you physically can't enter into a police station. You just pick up a phone on the outside and talk to whoever's inside about what you need. But you couldn't come in and make reports. It was not, but that's there, but different kind of city. Well, Detroit did the same thing.
I have a story, but I had a domestic violence situation impacting me in 1997. Lived on the west side of Detroit. The police precinct was right there on Grand River. And I finally got out of my house and drove to the police precinct and walked in and said, my husband has assaulted me. And the response I got was, we don't take those reports inside of here. You have to go outside and make a 911 call. So I had to leave and find 20 cents and call and say, this is what happened to me. And I just remember how devastating that was. The lack of protection. So in 2012, now divorced and everything, I think remarried, I'm working in the Brightmoor community.
Right.
And you know where Brightmoor is, far west side, right? The guy's reputation for having a little crime. And I actually watched somebody steal a car from the parking lot of the Brightmoor Community Center where I was executive director. And you call the police don't come, and you have nowhere to go to the police.
That was a common theme.
So it was like our city was not being policed.
No. Well, and then you had leadership. It was a revolving door of leadership. And the chiefs, the chief of police does set the tone, just like the mayor sets the tone for the city. And so if you have a revolving door then of course these things happen. So one of the things I did early on in administration that I focused on, I took the police officers off the forced 12-hour shifts to help raise morale. We went out vigorously looking for properties that we could purchase, and open police stations, and we did that too. And that was the beginning of starting to change the dynamic, the relationship between the police and community. Very, very important because, of course, the department, prior administrations would say, oh, we do community policing. But if there's no relationship, the key is a relationship. The key is trust. The key is community that will talk to you.
Yeah.
And that's so important. And so I was at one of these forums, candidate forums, and one of the candidates pretty much attacked me saying that public safety has to be at the top, and you're talking about neighborhood focus. I said, I am talking about neighborhood focus. And do you not think that with a neighborhood focus in addressing crime is not important? So a neighborhood focus, every place in Detroit, even downtown, is a neighborhood. So absolutely, I believe in a neighborhood focus, and that's when we created neighborhood police officers. We divided the city up in geographic footprints because I wanted to have a dedicated officer deployed in the field who would have a relationship with businesses, with residents, with schools in that defined area. And guess what? It worked. Because they were responsive and very important.
I got to throw to a quick break. We are talking to Chief James Craig, candidate for mayor of the city of Detroit. Stick around. We'll be right back. Detroit 1 Million is a journalism project started by Sam Robinson that centers a generation of Michiganders growing up in a state without a city with 1 million people. Support the only independent reporter covering the 2025 Detroit mayoral race through the lens of young people. Good journalism costs. Visit Detroit1million.com to support Black independent reporting. Interested in renting space for corporate events, meetings, conferences, social events, or resource fairs? The MASH Detroit Small Business Hub is a 6,000 square feet space available for members, residents, and businesses and organizations. To learn more about rental options at MASH Detroit, contact Nicole Perry at nperry@ecn-detroit.org or 313-331-3485. Welcome back to Authentically Detroit. We are talking to Chief James Craig, candidate for mayor of the city of Detroit. Donna, I'm going to throw it to you.
Yeah. So, and we talked a little bit about earlier, and you said you'd talk about it more if I wanted to. But I know that in 1978, the Detroit Police Officers Association actually sued Coleman Young for what they considered to be a civil rights violation in promoting Black police officers over white police officers they thought had more tenure and seniority or whatever it is they thought made them more qualified. And that's also the program that brought you into the police department to some extent, right? So how do you differentiate between the affirmative action that was used to help make police officers reflect the population of a community and DEI programs today?
So I'll make it simple. DEI is not merit-based. Equal opportunity affirmative action is merit-based. It's this whole idea that, okay, I mentioned earlier in my comments that I was the first Black police chief in the whole state of Maine, first Black in Cincinnati, Ohio. I got both those positions based on merit. That's a fact.
Well, I mean,
but no, this is it. You asked me the question. I'm telling you my view of it.
I understand, but I'm asking you: are you suggesting that people today who get positions through DEI, or students today who are admitted to universities through programs designed to help advance their access, you're saying they don't deserve it or they haven't earned it?
I'm not saying that they don't deserve, but the difference between EEO and DEI is merit. Now, here's where merit works. So, for example, if you have inequity, say, of women in leadership positions in a police department, and the reason why there's inequity because maybe some of these women weren't given positions that would give them the experience to compete for positions of higher authority. So as chief, and I did this in every department, I've created to level the playing field, and I've mentored a number who have since gone on. In fact, 2 African-American females became chiefs of 2 major cities, Dallas for one, and Columbus, Ohio, 2. And then a gentleman in Southfield who was a chief, and it's a whole lot. But my point is, they got there based on merit, but to level the playing field, they had to have the type of experience. So if I'm competing for police chief, as an example, and I'm going against someone, I've never been a chief, and I'm going against someone who's been a chief, say, in 2 other cities. Of course, from experience, probably a stronger candidate. And so to level the playing field, you have to ensure that people are exposed, that you encourage them to get education.
All right, but hold on.
You cut me off.
We said we were going to have to jump in because we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
I just want to point out that my son went to U of M as a lead scholar, right?
Okay.
He had a 4.3 grade point average and a 32 on the ACT. I could not afford to send him. He had a LEAD scholarship, and LEAD was designed to close the gap for children who had other barriers. There's no way he didn't deserve to be at the University of Michigan.
I
but
agree.
at the
He
same
does deserve
time,
to be there.
but at the same time, the scholarship program that brought him there was dissolved by the university out of anti-DEI policies. U of M's black population is about 4% and has been for so many years, and the students who go there have to score high. So it wasn't that they didn't have the merit. It is that there was the perception that they did not belong here. So I guess my question, in leading the majority, the largest black city in the nation, right? You want to be the mayor of the highest population of black citizens in the nation. And we have a president who you say you can just pick up the phone and call, who believes that students like my son did not belong at the University of Michigan. How do you help the black population in Detroit feel protected from these notions
of the
of
example you just gave
incompetence?
Is certainly wrong. I mean, clearly your son was well qualified. And, I mean, DEI versus equal opportunity, affirmative action, again, I came up under affirmative action. But nobody, just like your son, nobody gave your son, based on merit, accomplished what he accomplished.
But the program...
But you just can't put somebody...
But the program that allowed him to go there, and there's no evidence that those students did not belong there. And by the way, it also went to rural white students. It wasn't just black students. That program has been dismantled based on the viewpoint and the assumption that he was not qualified because
so what
he's
was
black.
the program that was in place before DEI?
What they was affirmative action. Well, affirmative action programs have been outlawed, and all of this affirmative action has been struck down by courts. And I don't believe that we're getting from D.C., let's replace DEI with affirmative action or equal opportunities, because it doesn't look like the Equal Opportunities Commission exists anymore at the federal level or the Civil Rights Department.
I'm not certain about that.
Well, but I guess my question is, I think a lot of Detroiters want to be protected from the policies and the mindsets that are coming through this MAGA culture. And so how would you, as mayor of Detroit, make us feel more protected than we do right now?
Because I always have operated from a place of fairness. And my record speaks for itself. DEI, I operated from a place of fairness. So it's also unfair. You say, well, we need a black female to be a commander. Okay, then can she, and is she the most qualified? Because that's what it comes down to. Do you think it's okay to put someone in a seat like the chief of police, but we need to have a black chief? Why can't we just say, can we hire the most qualified? Now, I got to believe if you do a national search around this country, you will find qualified black chiefs, Hispanic chiefs, white chiefs. But our focus shouldn't just solely be on race.
It never
it cannot
It never has been.
Because it should be.
It never has been. But, we have right now a presidential candidate that has almost no black men. So if we, by this logic, black men are not qualified to serve at a federal level. So I don't want to debate this anymore. I just want to point out the optics of this to many Detroiters that we're not qualified to lead.
Well,
when the plane crashed in D.C. and with the helicopter, before anybody knew who was flying the plane, the assumption was it was DEI. And that was put out there, and someone said, how do you know it was DEI? And he said, well, it's just common sense. This is...
Can I say something just to keep
the phone call?
Can I keep it?
Yes.
Because I don't want to debate you out.
Right.
I understand where you're from. And
right. Okay.
I get it.
All right.
But as the mayor of this city, my commitment, as it was when I've been a chief in 3 cities, that I operate from a place of fairness, and I will always operate from a place of fairness, and making sure that people have an equal opportunity to compete. And the only way you can do that is put them in positions. I'll tell my own story. There was a white lieutenant in L.A., I was a sergeant, who approached me many years ago, and he said, I'm starting an audit unit, and I want you to come in. I said, I really don't want to do audits. I want to stay out in the field and supervise. He said, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? I want to be a chief of police. He said, well, the only way you can become a chief of police is you're going to have a diversity of experience, because you're going to compete with people that have wide-ranging. Now, having been the president of the Black Police Association in L.A., we all knew that certain officers got certain jobs. And so, of course, they get the leg up because they're working in these high-profile administrative units that give them the experience that they can go into an interview and get the job, because, frankly, if all you've done is field work in the police department, you're not going to promote. And so one of the things that I made certain in Detroit was they have something here called Friends and Family. There's officers that worked the same assignment from the day they got out the academy for 20 years, using that as an example. And now that same person wants to compete for a position. Now they're competing for a position, maybe sergeant, maybe lieutenant, but you got someone over here who's had a variety of assignments. Which one's going to do well or do better in the process? Yeah. I mean, but you got to have a leader that understands that, who's willing to expose folks to different experiences. That's what I bring to the table.
Let's move forward. I want to ask you about your economic vision for the city of Detroit. Number one, what is your economic vision for the city of Detroit, and what is your understanding of our current financial and fiscal position headed into next year, recently signing, the budget?
Well, certainly I want to, focus on growing our middle class. In Detroit, as you probably know, there's, I think it's 22 middle class neighborhoods out of 200 plus.
Yeah.
Which, that's a key indicator right there. So,
what does that look like? Does that look like programs that lift people up out of poverty into the middle class, or attracting new middle class people to come to the city?
Well, Detroit needs to be a strong middle class city like it once was.
Absolutely.
And I gave that example early on. But there has to be economic opportunities. And so it's multifaceted, of course, but let's talk about small business development. One of the things is I've talked to people in the city of Detroit who are entrepreneurs. They have jumped through hoops after hoops to try to start a business. And so we're not growing the small businesses in the neighborhoods. That's the economic engine of the city. And this is not to discount the large corporations that are here, and that we should continue to do that as well. But in order to do that, we got to, first and foremost, we got to make sure our city is safe. People do not want to invest in unsafe city. That's just got to be a priority. Secondly, our public school system is broken. It's just broken. And I guess the reality sunk in when I ran for governor to learn in communities, our neighborhoods of color, or our most vulnerable neighborhoods, by way of example, that third graders in public school only 8% could read. When the goal is you have to learn to read by 3rd grade so you can read to learn in the 4th grade. It's broken. So that has a direct impact when you talk about the economy.
What would you do to fix schools?
Well, the mayor doesn't control the school. I understand that. But certainly...
The mayor has influence in the bully pen.
Right. Well, that's what I've said publicly. You use the bully pulpit, partner with the superintendent. I've been very vocal. I know he doesn't care much for me, but I'm passionate about it. The schools are broken. And when you talk about population growth, you talk about black families who have left Detroit, one of the reasons is the broken schools.
So I want to. I really appreciate you saying that small business, neighborhood businesses are the backbone of the economy, because that rarely gets recognized. Right? Yes. It's always downtown.
Right. Downtown's important.
Downtown's important,
but the small bit.
I'm not discounting that it's important.
Right.
But I think people don't always understand the importance of small businesses to our economy. And to a certain extent, a lot of our resources are tied up downtown because of the Downtown Development Authority and its structure and the rules that say that, those dollars that are generated through property taxes that are, impacted by all of the investments we're making downtown can only be spent downtown. What do you think about proposals from various parties that say we need to change that so that we can have some of those captured resources also support our neighborhood businesses to grow our city?
Well, it's called building those relationships with big business to help support small business. Certainly one of the impediments that I find, and I'm hearing this from mainly African Americans who are business owners, and what they've had to endure, and first and foremost, is the bureaucratic red tape. Mm-hmm. I know a woman now who has a restaurant on the east side. She's opened a second restaurant on the east side. And she's been trying to open that restaurant for, now it's been about 2.5 years. That's not how it should be. I do have a plan to address that, because another example was a lady who just opened a cigar lounge restaurant on the east side of Detroit, over in the area of the Stellantis plant. And she said, well, Chief, I own 3 businesses. So I said, okay.
She's right on Mac, right?
Right on Mac.
Yeah.
And we've had a long conversation. Oh, well, my 2 other businesses are in Dearborn. I said, Dearborn? I said, why are they in Dearborn? I said, because I didn't want to go, it's seamless to open your business. It's just seamless. And so my thought is we can have that in Detroit. This is not that complicated. I mean, even as the chief, I would hear from folks, and I didn't control it, but it was a bureaucratic red tape. So my view of stimulating small business and continuing to work with big business, I started it in the Detroit Police Department. It was a program, data-driven management program called CompStat.
Very familiar.
And so my thing is CityStat, because one of the most important, it's not just having data to say, look at what we have here, because I want to talk, it's data that should be transparent and available to the public, but it's a great tool to hold people accountable.
I'm glad you mentioned data, because as we're talking about the current economic picture of the city of Detroit, I think the average household income sits at around $30,000 or something like that.
26, but maybe you're right.
It fluctuates between $26,000 and $30,000. Right. I think that because even without bureaucratic red tape, there's still so much holding front load costs to starting a business, right? And being able to really take part of the economy in your own neighborhood. And that's the average Detroiter. The average Detroiter cannot afford to start a business. Where is the financing going to come from? Right. What does that capital stack look like? And so as you talk about a view of rebuilding a middle class in the city of Detroit, what does that look like for people who are at $26,000, who are at $30,000, who ain't thinking about trying to start a business, who are really just trying to survive?
Well, we got to work with the educational systems, workforce development. Here's another real story. When Mayor Duggan did a great job at negotiating with Stellantis, getting a plant built here in Detroit for the first time in 30 years. I think it's the Jeep plant.
It's right up there.
Yeah,
Right up there, right down
behind
here,
us.
Right behind the building.
Right there, yeah. And so that was a big deal. But here was the eye opener. So he also negotiated hiring 3,500 Detroiters. Now, automobile manufacturer, good paying job, stable. Well, can be, depends on if you're selling cars. But the thing that my takeaway from that moment was the automobile manufacturing plant of today administers an exam because you have to have basic skills that you get when you matriculate up through high school. Sadly, the city had got into remediation to kind of help some of these folks that couldn't pass the exam. And that's a direct result.
Yeah, but in fairness, he did not negotiate 3,500 jobs. He negotiated that Detroiters got the first right to an interview. And
okay, well, I heard it was 35.
Well, it ended up being 3,500 jobs.
Okay.
And, they went through these employment places. I want to honor my colleagues and people who live in the city of Detroit. We have a lot of brilliant people here. Lots of brilliant people inside of our neighborhoods and lots of capable people here. And so I think that the lack of capacity sometimes can be overstated. We work with students. We've got a teen center right here, right. People who know how to get into jobs and who are capable of reading and doing all the work. I think the challenge, though, for us when that was negotiated was that my nonprofit sits directly behind this plant. And there's a small little liquor store that's been there for 30-some years to 40 years that sits right next to that plant on St. Jean. And none of us were involved in the discussions. Why couldn't we be represented at the table? Doesn't that make sense?
It makes a whole lot of sense. And I know it comes up. One of the issues for me, when you talk about transparency, very important, but bring the stakeholders in because they have a vested interest in it. And you should have been brought in. I didn't negotiate the deal, but
no, I know you did.
I'm just saying that.
So what's your view on the current CBO that's on the books, the current community benefits ordinance that's on the books in the city of Detroit? Would you want to amend it? Would you keep it?
I would have to take a close look. There's a lot of things I don't know the answer to that because I don't know if I would keep it or revise it. There are a lot of things I would change. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. For example, really restructuring B-Seed, which is a direct.
Of course,
I would totally restructure.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do, part of my plan, like I did with neighborhood police officers. So I know the mayor started this thing with district managers, which conceptually I get it. I had neighborhood police officers, but I want to take it 2 or even 3 steps further by deploying out what I call neighborhood liaisons. Individuals who may have been formal inspectors and BC who are now out in the field, and their concentration is in a district.
We had that. They came through DEGC, and we had somebody appointed from District 4 to go to
Bivings.
Bivings, that's right.
Right.
Martell Bivings was our person, and it didn't really help. You know who has capacity? We do. In fact, hold on. My nonprofit has been here for 40 years. I have almost 40 years of nonprofit experience in this community. Jalen is over there. He is overseeing some of our business work. We have business professionals here. How does a city draw on the capacity of people who work in these neighborhoods and know what's going on so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel?
I'm in agreement with you. What I'm saying, my vision is not to take away from the great work that you've done here, and we should tap into it. What I'm saying is instead of having this bureaucratic downtown BC that's cumbersome, they do inspections, zoning regulations are dated. I'm saying we push it out on the ground.
Yeah. I'll say this.
And streamline it.
That makes a lot of sense. I just want to say this also, right? That with the Department of Neighborhoods, you all could actually fund organizations like ours to be your eyes and ears. You don't have to have bureaucracy in these neighborhoods with the Department of Neighborhoods. We exist, and I think the more that government partners with other people, the more efficient things become.
I absolutely agree with
you. So we have it on record that you pledge as mayor that you would partner with. Okay,
well, because
just want to say,
and I'm not just saying it because it's political speak. I'm saying it because this is the way I conduct business. I don't work in isolation, and I'm absolutely. And this was the dirty word when I came into the police department here. I said, "Why are we doing that? This is not an efficient way." I'm gonna give you 2 examples, short, quick. Why are we doing that? Well, Chief, it's always been that way. So, for example, sworn officers who could be in the field providing protection and safety, the dispatch center, the people that give out the calls when the community calls in, were police officers. The people directing traffic, police officers. I said, this is crazy. It was this way in the 70s when I left here. I said, every city I've worked, civilian employees do what? They work in the call centers. They dispatch the calls. In the big cities, Cincinnati, LA, every one of them, civilians direct traffic. So, of course, people were a little upset over it because it's a change. I said, we can't have sworn officers, unless they're recovering from an injury, of course, working in a dispatch center. And we're talking about we need more police. How about effectively utilize the ones you got? I'm going to give you another great example. So the mayor's office.
Somebody said we need more police? Who said we needed more police?
People said it for since I was here. I
hear people saying that. I hear people saying we need more police.
But we got to use the ones. We got to use the ones that we have efficient. So
I appreciate you saying that, because when I'm on the Riverwalk, I feel like I'm tripping over police officers,
right, and
they can't get a call here. Are you saying that we would redeploy some of these police officers who are just stacked up downtown?
I would have to look. I can't speak on what's going on now. Mm-hmm. So redeploying police officers where it makes the most sense and get the biggest bang for your taxpayer dollar. Because if I'm coming to you says, city, I need to hire 250 more police officers, where you got 200 sitting in a dispatch center, how do you justify the argument? You can't. You just can't do it. Point in case, and this was mayors before Mayor Duggan, Bing to be exact. I came in with emergency management. Bing had 26 Detroit police officers assigned to his executive protection detail. 26.
He needs safety.
There's more. If you're talking about 26 officers, that's more than some of our shifts have assigned to a shift. So I came in and I said, 20 of your 26 are going back to patrol duties. And he looked at me and said, you can't do that. I said, I just did. I'm going to leave you with 6, and I'm taking 20 and putting them back in the field. Angry, because it's always been that way. I think Kwame had, I'm told, I wasn't here, 30 plus.
Yeah, he had
why does the mayor's spouse, unless there's some kind of threat, need a police officer to drive and provide executive protection? Why? You don't need it. The mayor in Los Angeles City, the second largest city in the country, because I ran out of the chief's office, I ran the executive protection detail. He only had 4 police officers assigned to him. 4. So what makes Detroit so different? Oh, we've always done it that way, Chief.
So you would cut expenses where you can. You would look
Absolutely.
at gaining efficiencies. Where would you spend more money?
That's a great question. Certainly, I want to put money to help, like we talked about, small business owners trying to start a business who might need some kind of funding, or somebody trying to buy a home, a 0 down payment. Certainly we know that affordable housing here, I think right now they have 1,900 in the queue in Detroit,
we're in a crisis. We're in an affordable housing crisis.
A crisis. 44,000 is what
and
is needed.
And the queue is not the right queue, in my opinion. We're building a lot of studio and one-bedroom apartments while families are without housing.
That's how families are leaving.
We have right now under this mayor, there's a decision that we're not going to build neighborhood houses, like houses in the neighborhood, single-family homes, because it's not economically feasible, which is not true. But
what about what's those little mini homes?
Well, listen,
the tiny homes.
You cannot put a family in a tiny home. But I have this to say, real quickly.
I'd rather see a family in a tiny home.
How about
than
this?
In a car in a casino.
How about this?
Lot.
We are in the process of rehabbing homes that were pulled out of the demolition pipeline.
Right.
It costs just a little bit more to build completely rehab a 3-bedroom home than it is to build a complete tiny home. And those can be for families. All of this affordable house, all of this vacant housing and underutilized housing in our communities, I think that's the most affordable way to build back up our neighborhoods.
And you're probably right. And if I had the numbers in front of me, I don't disagree with you. I think we do need to do it because one thing that comes to mind is that land bank.
Yeah, I want you to remember when you grew up in Detroit, the houses in the neighborhoods were what made a city strong.
No,
that neighborhood housing.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying there's got to be alternatives because what we're doing now is not working. We need 44,000 homes.
And so what we need to say, if we had 29,000 vacant homes in the city of Detroit, any of those homes that could be saved could be put back to use for low-income people at a more affordable way. And so my final question, I know that we're stuck on time, but for people who work in this industry of community development, we need resources to do it. We have a house that we have, I think I read somewhere that it costs $435,000 on average to build a new house in Detroit. We're rehabbing a house. It's a 3-bedroom house. It's going to be beautiful. And the cost is going to be $195,000. We have $50,000 from MISHTA to go into that house and $0 from the city of Detroit, despite trying for 8 years to get the city of Detroit to free up some of its resources to support that kind of work. As mayor, would you support us fixing up neighborhood housing for families in our community?
Absolutely.
All right.
And I'll tell you, this is a heavy lift. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this is going to be simple, because it's not, because there are a lot of competing. I think it's important to not only the city play a role financially, but also we have to also consider state and federal dollars too.
Yeah,
because these ARPA dollars, I'm going to hit a question you asked her. These ARPA dollars are going bye-bye next year. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was reading an article. It's supposed to be a credible article. They said that the city has a shortfall right now of roughly $312 million right now. Now, I haven't seen the mainstream news. This is called MyCap, whatever the publication is. But whether it's real or not real, we know that we're headed towards a crisis.
Well, the mayor's getting right in time, right? Because he's going to the next mayor will inherit the crisis that happened on his watch.
We're headed to it. So what I've called to do, one of the first and most important things, seeing that I came in and I understand the urgency given that came in under bankruptcy, we will have an independent forensic audit. And I use the word independent because it has to be independent. But whatever the findings are, in a very transparent way, report that out to the community. Also, with the steps that we're going to take. Now, it's one thing to say, well, we do the report, and the report's done, and 6 months later, where are we? That's not how. That's why I said this city stat that I want to launch is very much about the transparency and a real-time communicating with folks, because Detroiters need to know, where are we budgetarily? Are we underwater? Because, see, we talk about stabilizing taxes, and we know we got to fund some of those critical services. And this is why I keep talking about small businesses that will help with the taxes and continue to encourage, large corporations to come in. We have to do it because why should we have some of the highest taxes of any place? It's ridiculous. I can't talk to you about insurance. That's another look, I live in the city of Detroit, and by the way, have lived in the city of Detroit both times. I was born here, and when I left to go to L.A., I lived in Detroit. When I returned as chief. I lived in the city of Detroit. I didn't have to live in Detroit. I could have moved to Grosse Pointe. There was no condition. There was no condition of my employment to live in Detroit. I chose to live here. And to me, that's a commitment. If you believe in this city, then live in this city. Don't come into the city because, well, I guess I want to run for mayor now. I'm just keeping it. I'm not shooting. This is not shots fired.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But if you want to, but if you want to be the mayor of the city, part of the commitment is you leave. Like I said, I didn't have to live here.
I hear you. And shots fired. Message received. If the target is on point, the target is on point. It stands for itself.
Absolutely.
You're listening to former chief of police,
shots fired,
James Craig, and he knows how to shoot. He was the chief of police.
That's what I hear.
I'm certain he's pretty good at shooting.
Pretty good at that.
Now, candidate for mayor James Craig, thank you so much for coming on Authentic.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I know we ran.
We have to come back. We have to have you back.
He'll be at the June 21st.
Yeah, you'll be at the forum. Yeah,
right.
Like I said, ours is going to be good.
Yeah,
and no fighting, no name calling, but definitely, hopefully, a lively conversation.
If you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, X, or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right, Donna, it's time for shout outs. You want to shout anybody out?
I do. I want to shout out Lauren Hood.
Yeah.
Because I was on Twitter the other day, I'm ashamed to say I'm still on that platform, but I was on there and Michael Harriot retweeted an article about her and was bragging about the Institute for Afro-Urbanism. Now,
That's
you
amazing.
know what I think about Michael Harriot. I was like,
yeah.
Yes, Lauren, you've made it.
Yeah. No, Lauren Hood. Lauren Hood.
No, Lauren Hood.
Lauren,
we have to take a picture.
Oh, yeah, take a picture. Okay, I'm sorry.
And Chief Craig, do you have anybody you want to shout out?
I'm going to shout out to my dad.
Okay.
James E. Craig Sr. and my late mom, Eleanor Whitaker Craig, because if not for them, certainly I am who I am today because of both my parents. Praise God for that.
All right. We thank you so much for listening. And until next time, everybody, love on your neighbor. I'm Orlando Bailey of Outlier Media and Authentically Detroit.
And I'm Jairus Days of Daily Detroit.
Detroit, we've got something special coming up that you won't want to miss.
That's right, Orlando. At 10 a.m. on Sunday, June 21st, we're bringing together Detroit's mayoral candidates for an in-depth community forum right in the heart of the East Side.
This isn't your typical candidate event. We're talking real issues, real solutions, and real talk about Detroit's future.
Join us at the East Side Community Network at 4401 Connor Street in Detroit from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
We'll be joined by my Authentically Detroit co-host and community leader, Donna Davidson, to moderate this important discussion.
Space is limited, so make sure to RSVP through the Eventbrite link in our show notes. Oh, and on that form, there is a spot for your voice to be heard to help shape our questions and the conversation.
That's right. Whether you're a longtime resident or new to the city, come by ECN on June 21st. It's your chance to hear directly from the candidates who want to lead Detroit.